Okay. Great. Good morning, everyone. I'm so excited to be here with you all today. I first want to thank Mrs. Parker, who I've known a very long time, and she is the reason why I am able to speak to you all today. I'm very grateful for her thinking of me and me coming to her memory for this. I'd like to thank Ms. Salter for all of the assistance along the way, all of the communication to bring you all this presentation. I'm so excited. I'm ready to share with you all. I'm ready to answer any questions that you may have. And as I say all the time to people, if I don't have the answer, I can probably point you in the right direction. Again, my name is Shainah M. Andrews. Feel free to call me Miss Andrews or Miss Shainah, whichever is easier for you. And we're going to begin the presentation right here. I wanted to show you all the title page to really connect the celebration of Blackness. As Ms. Alter mentioned, I will be discussing mostly food and language. And what better way than to show you a picture of food? This is fish stew. Now, fish stew is very popular throughout Black culture here in America, especially in the South, but it's also extremely popular, very popular in West Africa. And so this is actually my mother's recipe, which I share. And I eat it with what is called fufu. And I'll get a little bit into what fufu is into the project. So just a little bit about me. I graduated from ECU in 2019. I studied English and TESOL, which is basically a big word for teaching English to people who speak other languages. So I'm very fascinated by languages of the world and wanting other people to be able to talk in English. And that's really what I'm interested in. After graduating, mostly I'm an artist and educator. And so what that means is I am mostly an author, a poet, a spoken word artist. And as I said, I educate people about language. Today, we will be learning about three main topics: a brief history of the real Africa, food in the African diaspora, and language in the African diaspora. Now, some people say diaspora, some people say diaspora. That's a big word just to mean that the African diaspora means the many communities of people who have African descent around the world. So Africa is the continent, and the diaspora, we could even include America, where we all are. You can include South America because there are Black people in South America. There are Black people all around the world. And so that just means we're looking at all of the African descent communities around the world. Whether by force or choice, Black people are all over the world. I've been fortunate enough since going to college. I've started to study abroad, and I had a lot of experiences so far. I've been to a couple of different countries. This first picture here, as you can see with me wearing a jacket, is when I went to London, England in 2017 for 1 month during the summer. This right here is when I was in Ghana. That was my longest trip out of the country. I was there for one whole semester. So imagine you're in college and then one semester you up and leave from August until December. There I stayed on campus and I had a really great experience learning about Ghanaian culture. Ghana is a country in West Africa. Then while I was studying abroad in Ghana, I was able to go to a neighboring country called Cote d'Ivoire. That's French, and in English, it means Ivory Coast. So as you see, Africa has many different types of landscapes. There's mountains, there's beaches, there's forests, there's so many different views and moments to enjoy while on the African continent, specifically West Africa, because that is the only part of Africa I personally have visited. And lastly, my last out of the country trip was to Colombia in South America in 2019, right before I graduated from ECU. Now this picture, all of these pictures, they don't show people apart from me, or if you can see here at the bottom, people who I was hiking that mountain with in the second picture. But I wanted to include that all of the spaces that I've been to and spaces that I haven't been to but know about, Black people are all over the world. There are Black people there, whether it was by force, when there was colonization, or by choice, people choosing to move and live in these places. And you'll see those examples as I go on with this presentation. I wanted to include this picture because it is very powerful and it brings a whole new meaning to Black hair and what we call protective styles. If you all can see in this woman's hair is rice grains. And what is so significant and important about this is that during slavery, the women who were enslaved on the ships before they were brought over to America, or they also went to the Caribbean, as well as South America and other places in the world, rice grains were put inside of their hair so that they would have food to survive the horrendous trips, voyages, or whatever where we're going to put there to America and all the other places that they were going. And this brings an entirely new meaning to protective style because not only when we think of braids where the rice was also put, the braids were not just protecting the hair, to protect the hair itself, but protecting the integrity and legacy by feeding people, because if you don't have food, you will not survive. I want to make a point to say that slavery is part of Black history, but it's not all of Black history or where it started. As you can see in this illustration here, Africa has a long history of royalty, of regale, of gold, of ornaments, the streets being paved in very beautiful ways. And here on the right side, we have a map showing some empires of Africa between 900 and 1500. Royalty, as I said earlier, is nothing new to the African continent. Long before there was the talk of royalty in Europe, it is important to know that there was the Kingdom of Kush, Punt, and the Mali Empire, which were just a few examples that show gold, jewels, ivory, and so much more. A very, very little known fact is there was even the University of Timbuktu, or it's called University of Sankore in Africa. So there was actually a university in Africa many, many years ago. And here on the right side, I'm showing you a little bit of information about what is called Ghana. I have gone to Ghana. I have Ghanaian ancestry on my father's side. And so that is the country I am most acquainted with and I'm most researched in. And so that's what I'm going to be talking a bit about today. But I wanted you all to also know that before Ghana was actually called Ghana, it was called the Gold Coast. And if you can take a look at the name, you might be able to tell why. If you thought because of the gold in the country, you're correct. That is why it was very much a place where Europeans wanted to trade human beings. It also was a place for trading different minerals, but because it was so rich in gold as well as ivory and timber and very close to the coast, it was a very accessible place. And so actually Ghana means warrior king and dates back to the Ghana Empire between the 9th and 13th centuries. The country has only been independent of colonization since March 6, 1957. So that's only 64 years. Next month, actually, Ghana will have been a free country for 65 years. But when I wanted to include that just to show that Ghana and much of Africa, the other countries there on that continent, are still dealing with the impact of colonization, which is now called neocolonialism, because there is no colonization has legally ended, but there are new ways that Ghana and other countries are being oppressed. Now we're going to move into food. So I asked a question on the screen and I want you all to think about it. If you would like, you can raise your hand. Does this food look familiar? Have you eaten this before? Okay, I see some hands. All right. So this is actually a picture of a recipe that my mentor was able to a recipe she made, and she shared it online, and people loved it. It's very much Southern mac and cheese, and I included that picture because I want to talk about a very important person in the culinary world. On the left side of the screen, you see a picture of Chef James Hemmings, and we can trace the roots of mac and cheese back to him. He was from Virginia, and he was enslaved by Thomas Jefferson. And Jefferson actually required Chef Hemmings to travel to Paris with him so that he could receive culinary training. And we all can thank Hemmings for the idea of using milk to boil noodles for macaroni and cheese, because the milk is what gives it the creamy texture. And that was just one dish that Hemmings made and brought back from his time in France that even white people who were free in Virginia loved. And another fun fact about Hemmings is he spoke French. On the left side, underneath his picture, you will see I've included a few foods. Now, while Hemmings did not invent French fries, he did bring them to the United States. He also introduced ice cream. And as you can see here, these noodles and cheese are to represent the macaroni and cheese. Now, if you are able to use or watch Netflix, I highly recommend watching a series called High on the Hog, which talks about food and all of the ways that it is connected back to Africa. And you can also read about Chef Hemmings online if you do not have Netflix. Someone else that I'm really excited to tell you all about today is a woman who I believe more people should know about. And I wrote a lot on the screen, but I'm going to talk to you all and sum it up because I want you all to not necessarily just see what I've written, but I want you to hear what I'm saying. So the woman here pictured is Georgia Gilmore, and she was a very important person throughout the civil rights movement era here in America. She was known mostly as a Black cook, but she was also a midwife and an activist in her own way. So to give you a point of time, she was around during the time that people like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. were as well. And so while Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and others had meetings at a Holt Street Baptist church, Gilmore chose to lead in a different way. She secretly cooked food in her kitchen, and she sold fried chicken sandwiches and many other foods to Black people as they refused to support the bus system that would not allow Black people to sit in the front of the bus. And not only did Gilmore organize this food to be given out, but she also helped other Black women to sell pound cakes, sweet potato pies, fried fish, stewed greens, pork chops, and rice, which was sold at beauty salons, cab stands, and churches. So this was a group effort. This was actually something that Gilmore started, but other Black people would see, specifically Black women would see, and they wanted to help as well. So they began to sell food as well. And all of the money that was made from selling the food, it went towards a transportation system there in Montgomery, Alabama, which Black people were actually able to control and use. And also getting this transportation, the money also went to paying insurance, gas, and other types of expenses that you need to run a bus system. Now, Gilmore was very bold and smart. I think you all can see that in the picture I illustrated while I added to this presentation. It's actually a really, I think, a sweet story because it captures her personality. In this picture, she was like telling the photographer to wait, let her fix her hat as they were there and taking pictures of her. And I think that just captures her bubbly and very bright personality from the interviews that I've read about her. And she was very bold, but at the same time, she was smart because she knew that Black women's jobs and lives would be at risk if white employers and landlords knew what was going on, because remember, she was secretly cooking in her kitchen. And so when Gilmore was fired from her restaurant, Dr. King, he asked, well, why don't you go into business for yourself? So no longer was Gilmore hiding. She actually turned her home into a cozy kitchen. And even President Robert F. Kennedy would one day visit her restaurant inside of her home. So a lot of the dishes that I will be talking about today have meat, seafood, and even dairy products in them. But it's important to know that people on the continent of Africa traditionally ate like pescatarians, but mostly like vegetarians and vegans. Now, if you don't know what a pescatarian is, I'm actually one, so I can give you a perfect example of a pescatarian. We only eat seafood, so we don't eat any other type of animal. We only eat seafood. But vegetarians, they don't eat any type of meat. And then vegans, they don't eat any type of animal products. So you won't see a vegan usually eating cheese or milk or yogurt unless there are vegan options. I mention this because it's important for you to know that meat products became common after colonization by Europe in Africa. And you can read more about this and a little bit other information that I'll be sharing in my newest cookbook called Divine Bites. Now, these are staples, I would say, throughout the South here in the US, but also these are staples here in the bottom throughout West Africa. So can you raise your hand if you recognize this green vegetable right here? Okay, I see some people might know what it is. Okay, so do you recognize this dish right here on the right with shrimp in it? Okay, great. More people recognize that. Okay, I want to see if anyone can recognize this bottom dish right here, the rice with plantain and it's a Scotch bonnet pepper. Oh, okay. I actually see people raising their hand. That's exciting. And I'll just tell you all right here, this is the fufu that I mentioned earlier. But I want to start back at this vegetable. Now, when I say the name, many more of you might recognize it. You might go, oh, so this is actually okra. And in West African languages, it's very similar to the word that we have in English because it actually comes from West African languages. So Igbo is a language spoken in Nigeria, and the word is okuru, excuse me. It's these some of the languages, if you mispronounce a little bit of the word, it has a completely different meaning. And again, I don't speak Igbo, so excuse me, I'm not from the Igbo tribe in Nigeria, so I'm not really sure on all the pronunciations, but that is the word in that culture. And so here I'm showing you what gumbo is. But if you actually look at gumbo from what we know, gumbo is actually from a language called Mbundu, and the word is Ki Ngumbo. And it can be a little confusing, but I hope that I'm saying this clearly for you all. But the word gumbo, which is actually the food, the full meal that we all know, it used to just mean okra. And I wanted to show you that because it shows the connection to West Africa, because West Africans use okra in dishes today. They're actually used in different stews. Some of them are called okra stew. And we call it, usually here in America, we call it okra. But in West Africa, it's actually called okra. And it's used to thicken up stews. Down here at the bottom, I've shared a recipe with you all to make a staple here for African communities, but also in West Africa, it's called jollof. Now, every country has a different version, and it's a little funny. Every country, especially Ghana and Nigeria, believe that theirs are the best, and it's very playful, but it is a very important dish to West African people specifically. And every culture makes it a little bit differently. But since I have Ghanaian ancestry and I was in Ghana, I know the tastes and flavors of Ghanaian jollof. So that is the recipe I've shared with you all. And then fufu is actually something that you would eat with either seafood, or you can eat it with lamb, you can eat it with goat, or some people, again, not everyone eats meat or seafood, so some people simply will eat it with vegetables. Now, here's when we will begin to get into the discussion of yams, and that's actually what fufu is usually made of. So something a lot of people believe is that sweet potatoes and yams are the same thing, but they are not. And I think you can all see, as you see in the picture here on the bottom, and then also the picture here at the top, that they are not the same thing. So Why do people usually use both words like they are the same thing? I won't read this long part for you all. That's actually another part from my cookbook, Divine Bites. But I'm going to sum up for you all why there is that confusion of yam or sweet potato, which do I say? So as you can see from the previous picture, both are brown in texture, sort of. But if you actually hold a yam, which you can actually get at some Piggly Wigglies here, and also if you're familiar with the Greenville area, there is a supermarket called Tropicana, and it is an international supermarket where you can find many of the foods that I'm showing you today. But with the yam, it is a lot more tough and it's stiff and it's hard. And usually with a sweet potato, it's easier to cut through it. A yam, I recommend an adult using a knife to cut the yam because it is very hard and it is very sharp and it's easy to cut yourself with the knife if you're cutting a yam because they are very tough. And then a yam is white on the inside. With a sweet potato, as I'm sure you all know if you've eaten them or you've seen them, sweet potatoes are orange on the inside. Now with yam, they're usually boiled or they're pounded to make the fufu. As you can see, excuse me, as you can see in this picture, most of the times it's either boiled and eaten or it's pounded into a ball, like the food I just showed you with the fish. And these are very common techniques in Ghana and Nigeria, but also West Africa. And I know this is a lot, so bear with me, but also know that fufu sometimes can be the combination of plantain and what I just showed you, the yam. And that is actually very common in Ghana to combine the green plantain with the yam that is white. So you will hear people say things like candied yams, but as we see that it is not possible to have a candied yam because that is a whole another vegetable. But again, I ask, why do people confuse the two? And this is because during the transatlantic slave trade, which is people know as when enslaved people were brought from Africa to other parts of the world to be forced to work, there were white yams in Africa. But a lot of what the enslaved Africans saw when they got to America was the orange sweet potato. And so it was very similar and they didn't necessarily have a name for it. And it was very much what they thought was similar in size and shape and kind of texture to the yam that they knew back at home. And if we even look at the word yam, it echoes or it is similar to inyami, inyam, or inyame, which are all different words in West African languages meaning to eat. And that is what you do with a yam or a sweet potato. And so that is actually when those two words started to become very similar, or for some people, the same thing. And food like the yam, food like black-eyed peas, food like the okra, which I showed you earlier, and food like crab are enjoyed not only in the South here in America by Black people, but also in Africa. It's also enjoyed in Salvador de Bahia, which is a place in Brazil where there are a lot of people with African ancestry. And even here, I'm showing you on the right, this is a dish with black-eyed peas in it from Brazil. A lot of times when people think of Brazil, they don't think of Black people, but there is a population of Black people in Brazil. And down here, right underneath that meal, is something called dinde oil, but it's actually a palm oil, which is in Africa as well. But in Africa, it's called palm oil. It's just a different name because it's a different language in Brazil. These are just some dishes that you can make at home yourself or with anyone wherever you are. If you are able to, fish stew, plantain milkshake, plantain pancakes, and Ghanaian fried rice, but I've added a few ingredients to it. So if you're interested in any of these recipes, please do check out my cookbooks. I have two, which are really my way of celebrating not only Black culture, but I also have Asian recipes in there as well and Caribbean recipes. These are Black women who are currently in the culinary world that you can support. And they're actually all either from North Carolina mostly, or they're people who I've actually seen online and really, really love because their ingredients are very simple and their recipes are very easy to follow. I don't know if any of you already enjoy cooking, but if you have an older sibling or anyone who you would like to make any meals with, I definitely recommend you checking out people like the Big Yellow Pot for recipes. Keisha's cooking. She's actually giving meal prep, so she cooks food for people. And then we have Diamond's Desserts and Treats, and she actually creates delicious desserts here in North Carolina. This woman, Cook with Paige, is actually from North Carolina, but she lives in DC now, but she also shares online delicious recipes. And so does Wake Up with Marley, who is in Florida. Now let's talk about language. Now, I took a screenshot of a video here, but we're not going to play it. We're going to just discuss it a little bit. There is something called Black ASL. Now, usually when people talk about language, they don't necessarily think about signing, which is actually still a language. People may be using their hands, but they are not, that it is still language at the same time. And so I'm sure, how many of you have heard of ASL or American Sign Language? Okay, so yes, we're very familiar. But how many of you knew there is something called Black ASL? So there's actually a version of American Sign Language that was created by Black people as a result of segregation when the first deaf school in America opened and they were not able to attend. And so this is one woman, her name is Nakia Smith, and she's very popular. If any of you are on TikTok, I believe she's very popular there. And I don't have any experience with sign language, and so I won't be talking about sign language today, but I just wanted to show you all that language that is not spoken is still also a language because she doesn't speak the way that I'm speaking now. And there are some other people who sign who don't speak, but it is still a language. Now, language is important and the way that we use it is important. So I want you to remember a few things. Now, remember, as I said earlier, I've kind of already said this. Africa is not a country. It is a continent. There are actually 54 countries in Africa. Now, I won't name them all, but maybe one day when you go home or sometime during school, if you have a class where you're able to have a moment to go on Google, look up all of the different countries in Africa. There's Ghana, Nigeria, Senegal, Cameroon. There's so many. I'm not going to name all 54, but just know Africa is the continent and all of the places inside of Africa are the countries. Also, the second point I made is that when talking about slavery, we don't need to refer to the people who were enslaved as slaves. Let's instead say enslaved people, because they were human beings with talents, trades, dreams, and so much more, just like legally free people. Also know that languages signed by Black people, like ASL, which I mentioned, and versions of English spoken by Black people, like African American English, which is sometimes called AAVE, Jamaican Patois, which is spoken in the Caribbean, specifically Jamaican Patois is spoken in Jamaica. And then what are called pidgins in African language, in African countries like Nigeria and Senegal. They are none of these languages I've mentioned. They are not slang, they are not broken, they are not wrong, and they are not ghetto. So I ask, and this is something that I think is good to think about when we're calling languages, when people call languages those words that I do not agree with. And from studying linguistics, they're not accurate. So think about this. How can languages with rules that millions and billions of people use every day be broken? Now, the way that you speak English at home with your friends, or for example, at the basketball court with your cousins, it's not always the English that you use at school, but it's still correct. Now, hear me out. It is very helpful to know how to speak in different ways when you go to different places. but don't feel bad if you don't sound like me or other adults that you know. Just like other things in life, language is very unique as well. How many of you know what day of the week you were born on? Raise your hand. Okay, good. That's good. And I ask you that because in Ghana, you will actually have what's called a day name. And so in West Africa, in a language called Twi, there are many different groups of people, but specifically, I'm showing you how the Ashanti people in Ghana will say their names. So there are different names if you're a girl, and there are different names if you're a boy. And so a girl born on Sunday is Akosia, Akosia. A girl born on Monday is Ajua, Ajua. A girl born on Tuesday is Abena. Wednesday, Aqua, Akua, excuse me, Akua. Thursday, Ya, Ya. Friday, Afia, Afia. And Saturday, Ama. Now for boys born during those different days of the week, we have Sunday, Kwesi, Monday, Kojo, Tuesday, Kwabena, Wednesday, Kweku, Kweku, Thursday, Yao, Friday, Kofi, Saturday, Kwame. And you may ask, why did I start on Sunday? That's because in Ghana, the day of the week actually starts on Sunday. And each day is something different. So if you're interested in knowing, my day name is Abena. And so that means I was born on a Tuesday. And so if you all enjoyed that, please be sure to keep your day in mind. And you can even share with your siblings, your parents. You say, what day were you born on? And you can tell them what their day name would be, because I will be sharing this presentation with Miss Alter, and she will be sure to distribute it with your teachers. And so each day is different. So Sunday is related to the universe. Monday is related to peace. Tuesday is associated with the ocean. Wednesday is associated with Anansi the spider, which is very popular storytelling and a part of history in Ghana. Thursday is associated with the earth. Friday is with fertility, and Saturday is with God. Now, this woman here on the left, she may look a little annoyed, and she might even make a sound like this. I'm going to show you all a sound she might make because she's frustrated. So I'm sure some of you might have heard a parent, a guardian, a grandparent, or anyone say, don't suck your teeth. And in African countries throughout the Caribbean and countries in South America, like Ghana, where Black people are, this is usually called kissing your teeth. And I included this because this is very popular among Black people when you're annoyed, when you're frustrated, upset in some way, to make that sound. But in Africa, it is much longer. So I want you to hear the difference. This is what it usually sounds like here in America. This is what it sounds like in Africa. It's much longer. And that makes sense, in my opinion, for kissing your teeth, because it's a lot longer. Now, one of the last examples we'll be going over in this presentation is me showing you examples of Ghanaian English, which is sometimes called Ghanaian Pidgin, but since it is a full language, I call it Ghanaian English. An example is I beg, and it means I beg or please. So an example of a sentence is Chale, I beg, how much? So you're saying, friend, please, or friend, I beg, how much is this? And you might say this if you're in Ghana and you're trying to ask someone selling something, for example, how much is this shirt? The next one is chop. And this word, it depends on the conversation you're having. It could mean you're eating or you want to go eat. It could mean you're spending money, or it can mean you're at a chop bar, which is a place in Ghana that you can eat at. And it's typically on the roadside. So you can be driving down the road and you see what's called a chop bar, where you can stop and get certain meals to eat. You dey barb? and that means, do you understand me or do you get me? And dash, it might sound like a word that we might know for running, but actually in Ghanaian English, it's a tip or a gift, sometimes a bribe. It's usually about money. So a sentence example is, I go dash him small. And that means I will give him or her a small tip. Now, keep in mind that I do not know all of Ghanaian English. My accent is not what you will hear in Ghana or by people who actually speak the full language. But those are some phrases I wanted to share with you all. Whether you say ain't, they be late, make we link up morrow, dim, anything like that or similar, I want you to know that your English is not something that needs to be fixed. And so that is all that I had to share for you all today. I'm so thankful for you all listening and for you all participating with all of the parts where I said, if you know something or if you've seen it before, please raise your hand. Now, if you have any questions, I would love for you all to go right ahead and, just ask them, whether that's in the Q&A box, or I'm sure your teacher will unmute the screen and you can ask your questions. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen now so I can go back to Zoom, and we're back. So that was the presentation. Again, the table that talks. Thank you all. Okay.
It looks like Miss Brown
Caitlin
has
Brown
a student there.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Good morning.
She can hear you now.
Hi.
Good morning.
Williams. My name is Williams.
William?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Hi, William. What's your question?
What's your question?
My question is, who invented the slave ship?
The slave ship?
Yeah, who invented the slave ship?
Okay. So when I was talking about West Africa, I'm not sure how much you know about it, but people from Europe, there are different countries in Europe who wanted gold, who wanted ivory, who wanted timber, who wanted different resources that West African people had on their land. And so those people were going on the ships that were known to take the people, and they were going to Africa. And like I said earlier, I was talking about Ghana. So for example, there were people from Portugal, which is in Europe. There were people from Spain, which is in Europe. There were people from England, which is in Europe. And they are using these ships to go not only bring people from Africa to other parts of the world during slavery, but they were also very interested in all of the different resources and materials that were there. Because keep in mind, Africa is a very rich place, not just with money, but also with what is on the land and in the land.
Okay.
Very good. Thank you. I think
Thank
Miss
you so much
Shivers,
for that.
Miss Shivers has someone with a question.
Okay. Hello.
Hi. My name is Zion.
Nice to meet you, Zion.
My
Oh, hello.
We're having trouble hearing her, Miss Shivers. I'm not sure.
Okay. Okay, so I will read out the question for you all once Miss Shivers types it in. And for now, Miss Alter, someone, I believe Morgan asked, do you know sign language? And I do not know sign language. I would love to learn. Again, there are many people who speak, who sign the language. And actually the woman that I showed you all during my presentation, she is a fourth generation of people in her family who speak or who signed Black ASL. And so I thought that that was very fascinating. And just like language that we all speak, like English and all of the other languages that we speak change over time, so does Black ASL. So there are actually different signing gestures that are probably not used by the woman who is closely related to my age, but like her grandparents, they might use those words because that was how they would sign back in their day. Okay, so the question was, when enslaved women had the rice in their hair on the ship, is that all they had to eat? Okay, and then there's a second question. So I'll answer the first question first. So that is not all that the enslaved Africans on the ships had to eat, but they also did not have a lot to eat. So something that was actually eaten during that time and on those ships would have been something like the yam that they had, or something like the sweet potato. And it wasn't all that they had, but I want you all to know that this wasn't something that they chose. None of the enslaved Africans chose to get on these ships and be taken from their homes and their families. And so they were given very little, what is called the bare minimum, to eat. They were just given enough to barely survive. And there were many, many African people who did not survive the trips. There are many people who did not make it to the destination that they were forced to go to. But the thing is about the rice, the African women recognized that they did not know how long it would take to get where they were going or how long it would be. But rice is something that you can actually store and last for quite a while. And so they were very smart and resourceful in using the rice. So thank you for that
Really
question. And then the second question, yes, very fascinating. Then the next question was, how long have you been a pescatarian? And that's a very quick answer. Since July of 2013. So it'll be, how long is that? 9 years in July of this year. So yes, a very long time. And a lot of the recipes in the cookbooks, they do have seafood because I do eat seafood, but I also don't always eat seafood. So if people are interested in tofu or eating more beans, or even if you see that the recipes I include don't have any type of meat in them, feel free to add whatever you want to the dishes. Okay.
I think
Is
Miss
there a place
Madera's
in
class
Green-
had their hand up next. Miss Madera, were you able
Okay.
to unmute? Maybe
Thank
we
you.
can hear you.
Okay.
It was the same as Miss Shivers' last question. One of my students wants to
Oh.
know if there's a place in Greenville or Winterville where you can buy fufu.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. Okay, so there actually is. And so I'll give you kind of a two-part answer. So the first one is, if you go to, I'll put the name in the chat for you all. Now, the name of the supermarket that you can go to buy fufu is called Tropicana, and it is near the Greenville Airport. And in there, you don't get the fresh fufu, that's been pounded and everything, but you will get the powder, which is actually easier to make because you can add it into a pot with water on the stove and whip it up yourself. And so you will get the experience of fufu. And if you don't feel comfortable making fufu, that's completely okay. There's also the more difficult option is to actually get the yam and plantain blended and mixed. But I do not recommend starting off by doing that. If you're not comfortable, definitely buy the boxed fufu. And that's a little bit easier to follow, and you can read the directions on the box. And even though this is not in Greenville, if you're ever able to go to certain restaurants, such as in Greensboro or in cities like Charlotte, where there are African restaurants, they actually do have fufu on the menu.
Miss Salter's
Okay,
class asked, what kind of gold did the people want from Africa? Summer asked that question.
Okay. Oh, that went right by me. Okay. So usually when the resources that were wanted, I believe it wasn't because, to backtrack a little bit, there were actually like gold necklaces and gold rings that were worn by people, mostly royal people in Africa. But I do believe that the gold that was wanted was just the raw material, which you could do anything with it, so they weren't just going to Africa to steal necklaces and steal rings. But if you have the raw material, you can do so much more with that.
Miss Brown's class, you can unmute yourself.
Hi, my name is.
Oh, sorry. I think
We've
the
lost the
sound just cut
sound.
out a little.
Yeah.
After you said hi.
My name is Wilson, and I have a few questions.
It's really low, Miss Brown. It's really hard to hear
Yes.
him. It got really low all of a sudden.
Okay, I'll type them in. Can you hear me?
Okay, thank you, Wilson. I heard you say your name though. Okay, we have a question. How do you make again, I don't speak any languages in Brazil, carajé. I believe that's how it is. And it's a black eye pea fritter with shrimp in that. Now, I can't remember if on the recipe that I shared, I actually put a link to a recipe. I've never made that myself. I know about the dish and I've seen it online, but I will, again, in the chat, I will type in actually a man who traveled to that place in Brazil, and he actually was able to meet with people in Salvador de Bahia, and he was able to learn how to make a lot of different dishes. And I believe he makes it he shows how it's made on his channel, but if not, you can always Google a recipe. And what I recommend when you're making recipes from other cultures, try your best to find a recipe from someone who has experience with that type of food. So, for example, if it's someone's first time making something, they could give you very helpful information. But in my own opinion, in my experience, I would prefer to learn from someone who's from that culture, or someone who has experience cooking that food. So, for example, if there's someone who's trained in French cooking, but they might not be French, but they have that knowledge and training, those are people I recommend learning from. Okay, so
Logan
go
in
in
Miss
the order I
Madera's
see.
class asked, have you ever tried gumbo?
Yes, I actually have. So in 2019, was it the last semester? I believe it was, I can't remember which year, it seems so long ago. But while I was at ECU during spring break for one time, me and a group of friends, we actually went to New Orleans, Louisiana. So I was able to actually try gumbo, which many people know. New Orleans and Louisiana as a state is very famous for the gumbo. And I had shrimp gumbo, of course. It's usually made with shrimp, sausage, and a couple of other ingredients, but of course I got it without the sausage. But yes, I have tried gumbo, and it's very, very good.
And a question about what part of Africa are you from?
Okay. So I'm from here in the United States. My parents were born here. My grandparents were born here. Basically, everyone in my family that I can trace back is from the United States. But my aunts, one of my great aunts, and one of my dad's sisters, was able to do research and was able to do tests to prove that we actually have roots. We have ancestry in Ghana, which is in West Africa, and also in Nigeria, which is West Africa. So it is very common for Black people to be from somewhere in West Africa. And that is because a lot of the enslaved people who came from Africa were in West Africa, because again, it was very close to the coast. But again, there's West Africa, there's East Africa, there's so many different places in Africa that it's not always easy to pinpoint people's history if you don't have that direct connection. Okay, someone said the different fabrics in traditional African clothing. So the very popular and well-known fabric is actually kente cloth. And I won't say just in African clothing, because every country has different fabrics and different material. But I will speak for Ghana specifically, again, with my experience and my history. And kente cloth is something that is very popular. It used to actually just be worn in very for like very specific celebrations, and I believe it used to just be worn by royal people. But now, as you see, people have kente cloth for weddings, for birthday parties, and even something that's very popular among Black Americans like myself is when you graduate, you will get a kente, you can buy a kente stole. So you're showing your African heritage, your African pride when you graduate from college by wearing one of those stoles. And I actually wore one myself when I graduated from ECU, even though I graduated the semester after I got back. I actually have a friend whose family is from Ghana. And when her mom went back to get her and some other friends there stole for graduation, I actually just asked her, hey, I'll give you the money. Can you pay to get mine made in Ghana? And so that was a really great experience for me. Okay, Miss Brown's class. Oh, that's Wilson asking, what does okra taste like? Are yams vegetables? What is your favorite food? Thank you all so much for these like fun questions and about me. It's really great to see you all want to know about what I share with you, but also about me, which is really cool to me. My favorite food, I'll start there because that's very simple. I love pizza. Like that's very French American, but pizza is my favorite. And right after pizza is shrimp, and then macaroni and cheese, baked macaroni and cheese, and rice. I can eat plain rice, but I usually eat it with other dishes. And so okra, what does it taste like? It really, in my opinion, it tastes like whatever you put in, it tastes like the dish that you put it in. And so I will say, if you cook okra long enough, it is very slimy, and it tastes like what you put in the dish. So for example, when I made okra stew the Ghanaian way, to me, it was full of the different spices that I use, such as salt, pepper, some traditional spices you might see like star anise, ground cloves. There are many different spices that you will find in West African food. And so I will say okra it can be slimy in texture, and it'll kind of soak in whatever flavor from the dish, that you're eating. And then yam is a root vegetable. So when you think of a yam, you can think of like a potato or a sweet potato, which is a root vegetable because it grows in the ground. And so it's not a vegetable in the sense like broccoli or what I'm drawing a blank here. But a lot of the vegetables that you might see like cauliflower and broccoli, it's more like a radish or a sweet potato or a regular potato. Okay. Ibrahim asked, did slavery exist in Ghana? Yes, slavery did exist in Ghana, and that's a little known fact, but it wasn't the type of slavery that we as Americans and people who are living in America know about. So typically in other in countries before the European slavery, there was actually different types of rules and stipulations. It was not as hard in the sense that you could actually get your way out of something or work your way out of something. But what happened when slavery came to Ghana in West Africa largely, and again, I'm giving you the perspective from my research and from my knowledge, but of course, as always, do much more research beyond what I say and what I know. But I can tell you that slavery took on a whole new meaning when it came to the African continent. For one, because these people were completely ripped from an entire part of the continent, and they were sent to different parts of the world. And it was not a situation where you could necessarily work your way out of slavery. You could not make these decisions for yourself. And it lasted so long, and it was so treacherous. But I do want to make that distinction that when European colonizers came to the continent, they were not only after the resources, but they were after the people as well. And London asked, why did they take people into slavery? And that kind of ties back into my previous answer and what I've said in the PowerPoint, but just to give you all just a little bit more of an explanation. There was work that essentially, to make it, I'm trying to simplify it as much as I can. There was work that needed to be done, and there were people who needed to do that work. And European people who were after African people, they thought, why not get people and force them to do this? We don't have to pay for people to do this. We won't do this ourselves. And it was, in their mind, it was smart to go to these countries and go to these places and take these people and force them off their land and rip them from their families. And like I said, these people had dreams, they had gifts, they had talents themselves. And so it wasn't like they were going to Africa and they were just stealing people who didn't know what to do. They were stealing people from families, they were stealing people who had trades and so much more. Thank
I
you
think as
all
we're
so
running
much.
out of time, but there's a couple questions I do want you to get a chance to get. So these will
Thank
type
you.
the questions. Penelope had asked about if you could tell us more about spoken word.
Okay, yes. So that's actually an area that I really love. And spoken word is turning what you've written in poetry into a piece that will be spoken and heard by people. So for example, not everyone who is a poet is a spoken word artist, and not everyone who is a spoken word artist is a poet. But I am a spoken word artist because I take my poetry that I've written down and I actually speak it and perform it. And I will share the PowerPoint again with you all, but I actually have different spoken word projects if any of you are interested. Actually, the one that came out last year is titled Freeman, and my spoken word name is Shainah. And briefly to explain, Freeman is actually a surname or last name that freed Black people in America would choose for themselves after they were freed from slavery. And it's actually two words just put together, free man. And so that was me paying tribute to my roots and also acknowledging the legacy of slavery and colonization here in America. But spoken word is wonderful. There are people from all backgrounds and cultures who speak it. And I really recommend you all not only checking out mine, but YouTube and everywhere else you can find it.
And Haley and Miss Madero's class asked if it was allowed for the slaves to have the rice in their hair, or were they hide it? Did they need to hide it?
Thank you. That's a great question. They actually had to hide it. So in the picture that I was showing you, it was within the roots, but typically what African women did was they would braid their hair and they would have the rice hidden in their actual braid. So it wasn't like it was sitting on top and it could fall off, or it was easily seen on the surface. I'm not sure if the colonizers would have known what they were trying to do, but to not risk it, it was protected in their hair.
And the last question, Miss Brown's class asked, what was your favorite place that you've traveled and where do you want to travel next?
Ooh, so everyone who knows me knows it will be a very big surprise if I don't one day live in Ghana permanently. And so that is by far my favorite place that I've traveled. And it's not just because of my ancestry, but genuinely, Ghanaian people are so friendly. They make you feel so welcome, especially as a Black woman. I felt right at home there. It was a great place to be for the food, the weather. Oh my goodness. If you love warm weather like me, you love being able to go to the beach in October, November, December. Fresh food, I again love language. So hearing all of the different languages, even if I can't speak them. Those are just a few reasons why I love Ghana. And the next place I'd like to go to, I've never actually been to Asia, anywhere in Asia. So I would love to maybe go to somewhere like Singapore or Thailand or maybe even India. So hopefully my next trip out of the country will be to an entirely new continent, because that is like on my bucket list of things. I want to go to at least one place on every continent. So slowly but surely. And I hope you all also get the chance to experience the world and travel one day.
No, I agree. I think traveling is one of the best things we can do for ourselves to learn more about other places and people. So, Miss Andrews, we have
Absolutely.
loved having you. You have been so engaging and just delightful. Thank you so much for taking the time to log in with us today. It has been just amazing. We are so thankful for you.
Thank you all so much. Again, if you have any questions, I will be sharing my email in that presentation with you all. And anytime you have questions or anything like that, feel free to reach out. Thank you all again for having me. And I hope you all learned something that you can not only share with your classmates, but with your family and your friends. You know, let's all continue to educate ourselves and each other and learn from each other, because whether you know it or not, you have so much that you can teach me and teach others. So continue on shining in your special way.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you, boys and girls and teachers, for
Thank you.
logging in.
Thank you so much.
And we just appreciate your taking your time today.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone. Have a great
right.
rest of your day and week.
Bye.